Okay, I suppose we're a little bit late in starting, which is partly my fault. I forgot there was a council on. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. I'm hoping we're going to have an interesting discussion and debate. My name is Jennifer Baker. I'm going to be moderating it, but I'm going to try and take a step back when I can to allow as many of you who want to ask questions. So we'll start with the panellists introducing themselves and giving a little bit of background on where they're coming at this from. But if during the discussion you do want to jump in, just catch my eye or raise your hand, and we'll try and make it quite interactive. I'm also going to try and follow a little bit on Twitter, so if you want to tweet questions because you don't want to speak in the room, that's absolutely fine as well. So let's start off. Perhaps we should go left to right or right to left. I don't mind. Who wants to go first? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can do that.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for having us and for Alta U to invite us. I'm Daniel Freund. I work for Transparency International here in Brussels for the EU office. We're talking today about the mandatory lobby register, or the transparency register for Brussels lobbyists. So TI has had a presence in Brussels for a number of years. We're celebrating our 5th birthday this year. And since the beginning, and even before there was a physical presence here in Brussels, TI has been working on lobbying regulation here in Brussels and has been advocating for a mandatory lobby register. So we have quite a long-standing position on this. And just recently, in the last few months, we have come out with 2 publications that reinforce that position. So first of all, we wrote a policy paper on the EU legislative footprint. I left a few copies on the table next to the entrance, or you can download it on our website, where we have outlined our positions on what we think a footprint should look like and what it is, and made concrete recommendations to the EU institutions how we can get there. The second piece of research that we published just last week is a report on lobbying in Europe, where we analyzed the situation of lobbying in 19 EU member states and for the 3 legislative EU institutions, the Council, Parliament and the Commission. And basically, came out with a scoring of how well each of them are doing in terms of transparency, integrity and access to decision makers. But maybe to answer the question, why does all this matter? Why is transparency interested in these kind of questions? And the first answer, of course, is that the legislative process at the EU level, becoming more and more important, the treaties stipulate that it should be as open and accessible for citizens as possible. And for us, then, the question of lobbyists, so representatives of interests, of citizens, of companies, of NGOs and whatever, they need to have proper access to decision makers. Lobbying in that sense is an integral part of a healthy democracy. We can actually not have a representative democracy without lobbyists bringing forward the interests as diverse as the number of citizens that we have in our countries and at the EU level. What we want to prevent, of course, with lobbying is undue influence, is an imbalance of the access that, for example, just certain lobbyists get access to decision makers. These kind of things we want to prevent, and that is why we're so interested in making sure that the regulation put in place to manage that system work properly. They allow proper transparency of who lobbies for what, how much money do they have. And we think that a well-working mandatory register is a fantastic tool to contribute to that kind of transparency. Just a few words then, maybe, because the question that was put to us is, how to ensure that the lobby register becomes more relevant, more accurate and reliable. And I think Pam is going a bit into the points why it's currently not doing that. But from our side, the 2 main points basically to ensure that the lobby register works properly is, of course, everyone needs to sign up, so how do you get people to sign up? And I think there's a bit of a carrot and a stick kind of logic. So you can lure people into the register. You can give them certain advantages if they sign up. Already, to get an access badge to the European Parliament, you have to sign up. Since the Commission decided in December to put a few more measures in place, now you need to sign up in order to get meetings at the highest level in the Commission. So these are the kind of carrot elements of this. And the other element is the stick, and that means that people that do lobby and do not sign up to the register, they should face some sort of consequence that can go from just public naming and shaming, but it could also entail sanctions, of course, or if people that have indeed signed up and don't respect the rules, the code of conduct for lobbyists, they can be sanctioned, they can be deregistered so that in the future they don't get any more access, or there could even be fines in the future.
Okay, well, I think we will probably come back to that idea of carrot and stick quite a lot over the course of the next few hours. Turning now, Pam, you're going to tell us, you're going to give us some more concrete details, aren't you?
Sure. I mean, I can either just introduce myself and then we go
Pam
to the questions,
Bartlett-Kentia, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Give us your first impressions. I mean, we've had Transparency International, we all know who and what they represent. Give me your sort of starting point and we'll move it forward from there.
Okay, sure. So my name is Pam Bartlett-Quintanilla. I'm a researcher and campaigner at a pro-transparency organisation called Access Info Europe. Access Info Europe is a member of the Alter EU Steering Committee. For those of you who don't know Alter EU, it is short for the Alliance for Lobbying Transparency and Ethics Regulation. Alter EU is a coalition of over 200 organisations from all across Europe, whose main focus is to ensure that there is transparent lobbying in Brussels and good ethics regulation. So we essentially have four main campaigns. One is the campaign for a mandatory lobby register, which is the reason why we're all here having this debate today. The second is to campaign for improvements to the code of conduct for MEPs, commissioners and EU staff. The third is to block conflicts of interest that may arise from the revolving door, which we might come back to later. If you have questions about what that is, I'm happy to answer them. And the fourth is to ensure that there is transparency and balanced participation of the European Commission expert groups. For Alter EU, lobby transparency is essential in Brussels, namely because Brussels is the lobby capital of Europe. It's, in fact, the lobby capital of the world if it wasn't for Washington, D.C., in terms of the number of lobbyists that are concentrated here and the size of the lobby sector. Lobby transparency in the EU is also important because we, as European citizens, have entrusted a huge amount of power to the EU institutions. And in a democratic society, we should know, or we should be able to find out, how that power is being exercised. Thirdly, and quite frankly, lobbying in Brussels really works. In fact, you could argue that it's potentially one of the most efficient forms of participation that currently exist within the EU institutions. So, and that's in fact why we all consider it, I think, to be a legitimate part of the democratic process. But there's one fundamental principle about democracy that is entirely lacking when we talk about lobbying. You can't have democracy without transparency. And we don't have transparency in the exercise of lobbying in the EU. And that is a major concern for Alter EU. So that's why we're here.
Okay, thank you. Very nice and succinct. Martin, I see you jotting down notes, so let me let you dive straight back in and react to that.
Well, if I may, nevertheless, perhaps some words about who I am and what I represent. My name is Martin Kröger. I'm the head of the Transparency Unit in the Secretariat General of the European Commission. So as most of you will know, the Secretariat General is working under the direct authority of the President of the Commission. So that already underlines the significance which President Juncker and the Juncker Commission is giving to this cross-cutting issue of transparency. And you also have heard about the measures we have taken in December to reinforce the rules of the game for interaction between the European Commission and interest representatives at large, so what we call now here, for our specific purposes, lobbyists. More specifically, I cover in my unit the transparency policy of the European Commission as a cross-cutting policy issue. and in concrete terms that can be broken down to two concrete specific measures, that is the access to document legislation and application, and the running of the transparency register. So I have, if I listen to what my other co-panelists have said, it is crystal clear that the European Commission can and always had subscribed to the main features of the policy as it has been described by my colleagues, in particular regarding the rationale and the legitimacy of interest representatives vis-à-vis the European institutions, which is even recognized in the treaty. I spare you the details of that, but indeed the one main feature of complementary participation in representative democracy is interaction between interest groups of all sorts and the policymakers in the European Commission, but also in the two branches of the legislation. Openness and transparency are also principles that are not new at all. They have been in the treaty for a long time. What we have to see on a day-to-day basis, basically what this means in terms of specific procedures. How do we break down these principles into something which is workable and which makes sense and serves the objectives? Perhaps sometimes we are not thinking enough about why are we all doing that, or we don't, let's say we do not shed light on the underlying rationale of what we are doing. So what we have in mind is to deliver on these expectations. Further down in the discussions, Vice President Timmermans will share with you what the political outlook is for the future, what kind of instruments we have in mind in order to deliver on this policy project of ensuring full transparency in lobbying. I think my role at the moment is, if I understand correctly, that we also discuss a bit the existing weaknesses of the system. So I'm ready to listen, to take note, and to answer to any questions you might have on where we are at the moment, what can be done in the immediate future, and I would rather than leave it to the political representatives of the European Commission to give the outlook for future developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's start. This is about ensuring the register is relevant, accurate and reliable. I think let's take the first word there. We can talk about whether we want to know how many lobbyists different organisations have or how much money they spend, but is that really what's really relevant? Surely what's really relevant is more of a qualitative information about what they do and why they're here in Brussels and who they're talking to, rather than simply the quantitative. I mean, that's a challenge for organisations like the Commission. What would you like to see, Daniel? I mean, do you think we've got it right up to now, or do we keep going on this path we've got?
I mean, as we said, for Transparency International, the lobby register should really be a tool that contributes to seeing who influences the decision-making process. What laws are lobbyists working on? How many means do they have at their disposal to influence a certain decision-making process? And for us, so far, with the information that we see in the register, often that is just not possible. A lot of the lobbyists, even, I mean, we have seen quite a spike in the number of registrations since the Commission reinforced sort of the incentives with the meetings. We have seen more than 1,000 organizations that have signed up since December. Nevertheless, we see that many of these organizations that have signed up, the information that they provide on what they lobby on is completely lacking. To give you a concrete example, the Global Investment Bank, Goldman Sachs, that signed up finally, and many organizations, Alta EU and CEO, have been asking for that for years. They finally signed up, and now they provide so little information and they declare such little lobby spend that it seems just ridiculous. other organizations such as Google, we see huge differences in the kind of expenses on lobbying in the US, for example, where Google declared almost 20 million lobby spend in the last year. They just updated their declaration here in Europe to bump it up a little, but they declared 3 million lobby spend here in Brussels when the European Union is deciding basically that they might want to break it up or launch competition litigation against them. So the question remains there, how meaningful is the information that we can find in the register?
Well, I mean, an organisation like Google, we know pretty much why they're here and what they're lobbying against. I mean, it's very clear when there's an organisation that's a company. I mean, do you think, for example, if we've got astroturfing companies or front organisations, how do we dig beneath that if we want to know what's really relevant, Pam?
Well, in order to know whether there is astroturfing, we've, for example, found examples where there is an organisation registered called the European Privacy Association, but digging in further, you find out that Google is actually behind that association. So you wonder if the innocuous-sounding name of European Privacy Association is really what it says on the tin. In order to be able to find out really what interests are at play in the EU institutions, unfortunately, you can't currently get that information from the Transparency Register. I think what citizens really want to see is how power is being exercised in Brussels and how the decision-making process is working and what impact different interest representatives are having on that decision-making process. And currently, the Register doesn't tell us any of that. The Register, one of the biggest flaws is quantitative. Essentially, since it is a voluntary system, not all lobbyists that are actually active in the EU are even signed up. Currently, the lobby register only contains those organisations that have proactively decided to fill in the register and provide information about themselves to the public. So those that don't want to be known, those that are doing astroturfing, as you said, those that are hiding behind other interests, aren't obliged to make themselves transparent. If we had a mandatory system with sanctions, perhaps that would be it would be a better situation. And in terms of the qualitative information, which I think is where we can really see how power is being exercised and what I think citizens really want to know, currently the register barely even contains information about which specific dossiers or legislation lobbyists are working on. So from the perspective of an ordinary citizen who wants to find out, for example, about the TTIP, I guess the first place I would go would be the lobby register. But of course, the first problem with that is that it's an incomplete database because it's voluntary, so not everyone is in it. The second problem with that is that I would then, obviously taking this large handicap, sorry to use the term, in mind, I could search for TTIP in the register. The search function is much better now, I have to say. The problem is that when I do search, I only get 58 results. And 58 results for potentially the largest free trade agreement on the planet is not very realistic, I think. Also, we have research from other organisations like Corporate Europe Observatory, for example, who have determined that the Commission has met with at least 300 stakeholders during the course of the negotiations, which is great. I mean, the more the merrier. But of course, they should also be in the Transparency Register.
Well, Martin, you can tell us a little bit about sort of how that is difficult to achieve procedurally, I suppose. I mean, you've mentioned TTIP, we've mentioned competition cases, we've mentioned legislation forming. I mean, do you have to break down who you as lawmakers see by whether it's legislation or whether it's a trade agreement or whether it's we want a nice outcome in our competition case?
Well, I mean, we have touched upon various issues now. If you, Mrs. Chair, want us to focus on how is the Commission ensuring that there is balanced representation in decision-making, is that the question? Yeah. So then this is linked also to the Transparency Register, but not only. The Transparency Register, as it stands already at the moment, foresees the obligation to indicate the policy areas in which the interest group is active and carrying out lobbying activities. Now, to believe from a practical and technical point of view that in real time, basically, we could at every moment and every minute of the day reflect 100% correctly who is working on which dossier in the European institutions is difficult to achieve, in my humble opinion. So a general indication of what am I working on, yes, that should be part of the package, and it is indeed already part of the package. Now, if we come on a more general point to the question of is the Commission biased because they are only seeing certain types of people in the decision making? Well, first of all, the consultation processes, there are certain rules, the so-called consultation standards. All contributions for public consultations are out in the open. They can be seen on the Internet. Stakeholder events, normally you would have access to all this. What we don't have at the moment is a fully fledged list of people who would then be indicated at the end of the process, so what Transparency International would call the legislative footprint. That is not an obligation, and that is also for somebody who has been working on legislation, I must say it would be quite a challenge, because you have to define where the process starts, where it stops, who are falling under the personal scope of such an obligation. So it's an enormous machinery. And then we come back to the issue, which in my humble opinion also is a little bit underestimated, which is the question that you raised, what is that all good for? So why and does the citizen want to know, and why should she and he know what's going on to this minute detail? Perhaps that is also something we have to discuss. So yes, there should be a proper reflection of who is participating, but there are technical and practical limits to it.
Okay, so how do you react to that? I mean, it's not the principle, it's the practical, what do we really need to know? I mean, so there's a little bit missing here or a little bit missing there, but we've got a sense of what's going on, and surely that is good for democracy.
It's of course a bit difficult in all detail to say what do we want, and I can even for us as an organization, of course, we can not guess everything that a citizen, a journalist, other civil society organizations want to know. What we're saying is that there should be a certain logic of transparency by default around the legislative process. Documents feeding into the process, lobbyist positions, all these kind of things should just in general be public and accessible to citizens, and then they can decide what information they need, what are they going to use, and what feeds back into the argument. But maybe one point from our side that we would like to point out when it comes into the details of ensuring that the register is working properly and can be what we want it to be, relevant, accurate, and reliable. We talked about the checks that are necessary. Of course, the public plays a huge role in this, and we have a situation, of course, in Europe where the information that is available is all out there for the public to look at, and they then have a big of the monitoring role. But maybe to give you a comparison from some of the other countries that actually do have mandatory registers and that do proper control of the information that is provided. There's a study done by an American academic called Craig Holman, who has extensively looked into lobby registers, both mandatory ones and voluntary ones around the world. And he looked, for example, in the Canadian system, one of the ones that works better and is often sort of taken as an example when people look into coming up with a new register. And there's a Canadian authority that oversees the information that is published, and that authority is currently staffed with 28 people. Then Canada is, of course, a much smaller lobby city than Brussels, by estimates somewhere between 3 and 5 times smaller than the amount of lobbyists that we have here. I think Martin can answer that question much better, but if you look into the current staffing numbers of the secretariats, both here at the Parliament and at the Commission, of the Joint Transparency Register, we're nowhere close to these kind of numbers. So those kind of issues is then, of course, also something that comes up where if the idea is there, and if even if we have an interinstitutional agreement that sets out the objectives of this, that's not in itself enough. We also need the proper resourcing, the proper staffing of of the institutions, of the units or the secretariats that are tasked with the oversight of this.
I'm going to just have a look out at the room and see if there's anyone wants any burning questions or even... Yeah, okay.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Stella Veliki. I have studied physics and informatics. I am no lobby. I have understand question. Two negative aspects, one for the lobbyists and one for the MEPs. When the MEPs want to take a decision or have a project, he is not an expert, it's very clearly. He must have expert opinion. And he normally will take a lobby who is very positive for his project. And they are interested to know a lobby company has a negative view for their project, or a very neutral lobby company. It's the same things for the European Commission. It's not only for the MEPs. So what I ask, if it's possible, you have here a code of conduct for the MEP. That's a very important thing. Then you can put them a proposition. Then if they take lobbies for their project, they must take one, a positive one, a negative one, and a neutral one. And they are very free to say, oh yes, I am more for the positive aspects of my project because, or the negative aspects of the project, they are not so important because. The negative aspect of the lobbies is there are a harassment of lobbyist people to the MEPs. They don't go away until they meet this lobby person. That's not acceptable, very clearly. And it's a thing that is very known here.
Okay, and do you have a question, or do you just want our panelists to
I have a question if you can put how the method to take a decision, and how they are working with the lobbies company, a positive, a negative one, and a neutral one. And it's a very objective perspective. And I come here to the seminar, I hear only positive aspects of a project. Is never, you have, and for the Commission is the same things, you know, it's not only for the MEPs. You never have a negative aspects.
Okay.
Why?
Well, I suspect that's probably going to be refuted.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm very grateful for this question or this comment, because it very accurately describes what the challenge for the decision makers is, both in Parliament and the European Commission. So what we need is to get, and you rightly say, the normal MEP or the normal Commission officials or commissioner is not an expert in a technical field. Let's take something very complex like financial regulation, where the sector would have said to us for many, many years, it's much too complex for you bureaucrats to understand, so we do not regulate. Because you will never be able to understand the complexity of it. So how can we ensure that we get all this information and in a balanced way? So there, I'm afraid, there is no easy and ready-made recipe for such a thing. So it is a permanent challenge. And, for instance, Mr. Freund would say in Transparency International and many of the NGO community, you just put all this information about who you have seen or the Commission has seen in the open, and then we will scrutiny to what extent that has been balanced, and we will tell you if that has not been the case. Well, there is some truth in that. Obviously, openness and transparency can ensure that if something is going into the wrong direction, there are corrective measures that are taken. But at the end of the day, it is the duty of each Commission official, of the politicians, of the MEPs, to do their job at the best of their abilities in an impartial and objective way. And that has always been like that for over 50 years of the existence of the European institutions, and that are the basic principles of decision-making in each democracy. So transparency in lobbying, yes, it's an important factor in good policy making, but it is not the panacea to all problems of our world.
Okay, the gentleman here in the beard wanted the next question.
Oui, je voudrais
Yes, I would like, well, it's not a question that I would like to put.
Translation in the room, French, English, so you've got your headsets here beside you, and
Oui.
you can find the channels.
So I'm not going to ask a question. I would like to put a proposal to you, because this model that I'm going to talk about could solve many problems that we are talking about. It's a problem that we are faced with today, and that could be solved thanks to that model. Now, there are several problems that have been mentioned, and that could be dealt with pretty quickly and in a very straightforward manner in the decision-making process. The diversity. Now, to be sure that there is a balance reached between the different views expressed. I mean, there's no way in talking about lobbying from the left or from the right. We could think of a democratic lobbying, and this could be a way of having a more transparent lobbying and avoiding problems of representativeness. For instance, in my model, trade unionists, politicians, industrialists, bankers, name it, they could be part of this in this lobbying, and this could be tantamount to a sort of parliament, an arena that would be open to just about anyone who would like to discuss a matter. Those people who would like to be part of the debate could say so 2 months or 3 months prior to the actual debate, and then we would have all representatives of women's groups, teachers, taxi drivers, bankers, trade unionists, whoever would be brought together, and they would have a debate, and this would guarantee that we would strike the right balance between all those groups, all those lobbyists, and there would be questions asked and answers given. I think it would be a very straightforward way to have transparency. Now, there is something else. I think that discussions should be carried out in the open, not behind closed doors, when, you know, money sometimes is exchanged. I think that here again, if we have this open space, bringing together all lobbyists, I mean, we would be sure that common interests would be upheld. And here, I think that we should try and find the right way of convincing people that this would be in the interest of just about everyone. Everyone would be in a position to monitor what is being discussed. We would have representatives of many different groups of civil society, and we would have politicians, philosophers, and we would have this contradictory debates, and this would be a way of achieving a fully fledged, perfect balance between all those different interests represented by those different groups. This forum would bring together all those people, and decisions made by this forum would be enforced, and they would be the only decisions that could be implemented and enforced. And what is being decided behind closed doors would not be implemented and enforced. What is being discussed in that forum would be recorded, would be made public on the internet, so that everyone could have access to what is being discussed. And there would be firewalls, there would be security measures to avoid any hackers getting into play. So it would be a way of knowing what the decisions that would be made, choices that would be made, and we would know more about our representatives, So it would be a way of achieving transparency and identifying the ones who would be our best representatives. This is something that would be highly positive.
So, and I know both Daniel and Pam want to react. Let's take off the table for the moment the suggestion of...
So it would be interesting to discuss this, to see which elements could be solved. I haven't had time to explain everything. I gave you a broad explanation, but you can see that there are many opportunities offered by the system. If you want, we can discuss this, and I would be glad to participate in this and to think about it. Could such model take on board this or that problem?
To take off the table the suggestion of money changing hands behind closed doors, because that's called corruption, and that's not what we're here to discuss today. There's already rules against that. But you wanted to react straight away, Daniel, and then Pam will come to you.
Basically, to just say two words to what the gentleman was saying, it sounds to me like you're describing the perfect parliament. I think, I mean, ideally a parliament is composed of representatives of all colours of society. So in theory, at least, we should have that already. And the European Parliament, in fact, is web streamed. All the committee meetings are out there. So in a way, I think we're not too far from that. We still see some difficulties, but we're at least on our way. One thing I wanted to react to is the question of transparency as the ultimate solution. For us at Transparency International, I don't think that we have any illusion on that. But when it comes to lobbying in Brussels, the big problem is we don't even know the extent of the problem. I mean, the decision-making process and the information that we have on lobbyists is still so shaky that it is absolutely impossible to give you a number of lobbyists in Brussels. We just don't know. When it comes to who influences what, we don't know. We're trying with different tools to get an approximate idea of that, and that's why we're basically asking for a legislative footprint to see the extent of the problem. And I think in that sense, transparency can only ever be the first step of the solution. First, you need to know the extent of the problem, and then you can start thinking about what are possible solutions to that problem. And I think and maybe to answer to what Mr. Kröger said earlier, just making the problem visible is not enough. When, after the financial crisis, for example, it came out that the only experts on how to regulate the banking sector better were in fact bankers, the Commission itself realized that something needed to be done and invested some money in creating the organization Finance Watch. That could be another voice in that debate. And I think if we increase lobbying transparency in general, and not just those sectors that already maybe get a bit more media attention, then we can take similar measures in other sectors as well, if need be. But sort of seeing how imbalanced representation is and how imbalanced maybe some of the expert groups are, that will provide us with the necessary information to think about, is it needed that we raise additional money for more organization, for better consumer protection organizations in some of these areas. And so transparency can only ever be the first step.
Just to link, I think, the two points that were made here. It's true that, commissioners have the duty to defend the public interest, and that's nothing new, and that's been, it's been part of their mandate for the past 50 years. But I think what has changed now is that European citizens are demanding more. We can't just place blind trust in the duty to defend the public interest by a commissioner. In a democratic society, citizens want more, and I think that's evident from the statements made by the two people in the room here today. We're really calling for more. We're more educated, we're more demanding. We've seen the impacts of the financial crisis. We're worried about decision-making. We're worried about capture of decision-making, and we want to be sure that we can see what's going on and adequately participate. So I fully agree with the utopian, sorry to call it that, form of participation. I do think that there are a few concrete measures that can be taken quite easily that can bring us closer to that. The question is, that you asked also earlier was, what do citizens want to see? Well, let me try and tell you. Citizens want to see who's meeting who. And they want to see what they're meeting about. So, for example, it's true that we currently have reporting requirements of meetings between commissioners and lobbyists, between directors general and lobbyists, and between members of cabinet and lobbyists. Well, those reporting requirements could easily be extended to other commission officials that are working on legislation. It could even be extended to MEPs that are working on legislation. In fact, we have examples. I think there are some MEPs here in the room who already publish information about the meetings that they have with lobbyists. We have some MEPs that even publish information about the invitations to meetings they get. We even have commissioners, Commissioner Malmström in charge of trade, who's publishing information about the requests that she gets and the correspondence she gets. You can see the invitations she gets and the replies that she sends back. These are measures that are currently in force. The only thing is that they're ad hoc and they're totally voluntary. But they're measures that could easily be extended and made mandatory, and that would make a massive difference to the quality of our transparency system right now. We also want to see what positions are being defended. It's true that currently we have a consultation process with rules on balance, with rules on transparency. That consultation process and that participation and that transparency in the formal consultations is great, but we don't have it in the informal consultations, which is essentially what lobbying is. So we should extend and regulate and make more transparent the practice of lobbying, which, as we've all said, is simply another part of the democratic process. But without transparency, there is no democracy. So that's the biggest problem that we face right now. Position papers submitted by lobbyists, for example, we want to see what's being argued, right? We want to see the points that are being raised, and we want to see what impact those points have on the EU's decision-making process. Position papers submitted by lobbyists to EU officials are, in principle, covered by the rules on access to documents. We, as citizens, have a right to access, or at least ask for, any documents that are held by the EU institutions. It doesn't have to be a document produced by the institution. It can be a document that they have received from an outside source. So, those documents could quite easily be logged in the current documents register. And we should be able to see whether or not they're publicly available, or whether or not they fall under a certain exception which is already regulated by the transparency rules. The problem is that those transparency rules aren't being applied to position papers submitted by lobbyists.
That is not what are you talking about? That is not true.
Go ahead, Martin.
Just one final point. And another thing that we need to see are minutes of lobbyists. I've made requests. I mean, now we have lists of meetings, but I've seen requests being sent asking for minutes of those meetings, and I've seen responses from the Commission saying that no minutes were kept. Well, why not? Surely minutes should be kept of all of the meetings, and they should be made public if they're not covered by any of the exceptions. And those are just 4 little proposals that I think would make a big difference and would take us some way towards what you were proposing, and technically aren't that difficult to implement.
I got a little bit lost among all these proposals, I'm afraid, but just to pick up on one point where I completely disagree is that you are saying position papers are not falling under the regulation 1049 of 2001
No, I
of
said the
access to
opposite
documents.
thing, actually.
When then, if you could explain again what you said.
Sure, sorry. Sorry if I wasn't clear. I said that in principle, position papers are covered by the rules on access to documents. So we can all request access to position papers submitted to the Commission by lobbyists, right? What I'm saying is that those documents are not currently in the register of documents, whereas it would be quite simple and quite easy to include those documents in the register.
The lobbyist documents.
Yes, the documents submitted by lobbyists in the register of Commission documents, so that A, we know which documents exist, and B, it's easier for us to request them. And, actually, those that aren't covered by exceptions could be published proactively anyway. Is that clearer?
Yes.
Yes?
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification and correction you made. So on the register, that is indeed true. The register, but that is, we could have another half an hour of debate of what is in the register or not. Indeed, it is not a complete register of Commission documents. I fully agree on that. To make the discussion perhaps a little bit more interesting, I would come back to what the gentleman said before, and you were very positive in your reaction. And that is, as a matter of fact, the main point of discussion perhaps between the European institutions and the NGO community. Should we go down that route, or is that not the right way forward? So I don't, again, just for the record, and I fully subscribe, and that is clearly the position of the Juncker Commission, transparency in lobbying and who participates in the decision-making, that is of utmost importance, and we are fully committed to improve on the current situation, and Vice President Timmermans will explain to you in more detail how we are going to go about it, in particular regarding putting into place a mandatory register. Having said that, I think one main point of misunderstanding is that the European Commission and I would suppose most of the MEPs are not favouring the model which has been described by the gentleman, which is basically replacing the representative democracy by direct democracy. As a matter of fact, already Rousseau had such an idea that so the l'Assemblée Générale is there and is under public scrutiny 24 hours a day, and because of this pressure, the individual interest is magically transformed into la volonté générale. So, I don't think that that is a system under which we are operating at the moment. We are operating under a system where the decision makers, be it the politicians, the College of Commissioners or the members of Parliament, they have the mandate to represent their constituency within the freedom of their political mandate. So you are saying, in order to make that work, we need 100% scrutiny of every second in the decision-making process, any minutest contact. That is what you are advocating, basically. So, and that is, for me, it's not feasible, I'm afraid. It is unrealistic, and we will never get there. So what can be reasonably done at the moment? Well, the mandatory register, that is a first important and the main building block of what the Commission has in mind. Minutes of meetings. It is established policy of the European Commission that whenever there are meetings which require a follow-up or play a role in the decision-making, that their minutes are to be made and to be kept and to be registered properly. Whether this is the current practice, I would have a question mark. To say that at the moment people do not get access to the document because they are not in the register, that is a completely distorted picture. Because in my unit there are 5, 6, 7 lawyers only working on requests related to decision-making processes, TTIP. I want to see all the documents related to TTIP, etc., etc. The Commission is working every day and spending a lot of money into these processes. Obviously, a more proactive transparency on certain documents, that could be a good thing, and Commissioner Malmström has gone down the route, and she, thanks to her pressure, there is much more available, etc., etc. But there, again, I would have a question mark whether this is then fostering the overall democratic process for 500 million citizens in the world. I am very much in favor of going forward. I do acknowledge that there are weaknesses in keeping correct record, etc., but that is not a systemic problem. There are problems, yes, but all the instruments at your disposal, and you are basically using them every day.
Well, if it was fully transparent, journalists like me would be completely out of a job. So, I think there was one more question in the room. Christian, yes?
Thanks, Jenny. I'm Christian Beck. I'm assistant to Sven Giegold, who is the MEP who is responsible for a report on basically also very much the lobby register to update it. And so I'm very much interested also like in that question that was raised. And the gentleman on the register, you just indicated that there are 5, 6 lawyers just basically working on requests for documents. Since the question of the quality of entries in the lobby register, Goldman Sachs, other cases, was raised, I was just wondering, would you be able to share with us how many hours a week, or like I don't know what would be an appropriate way to put it in numbers. How much efforts do you spend in staff, in hours, in filtering the quality, and like what hope would you have, like in what time would you be once through the whole register in cross-checking for quality measures? And to some extent, since a lot of information is basically a percentage of overall spending, how much is then going into lobbying, and numbers where it's not necessarily trivial how you could actually cross-check for quality questions. Perhaps you could also elaborate a little more, like what would be your yardsticks to improve the quality, against what factual information would you cross-check if the entry is actually correct or not? Thank you very much.
Well, we only have about... we're actually out of time. We've only got on to point 2, which was the accuracy. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to say, respond to the question, and then tell us a little bit your take on accuracy before we take our break and move on to our next panel.
Well, I think many of the points on accuracy I have raised. I've given a few examples, so I'll just yield it to Mr. Kröger.
I think problems of accuracy have been raised as well, and I think if we're running out of time, then maybe we should call it quits here.
Oh, well, I like this question because it's more pragmatic and technical. So I'm supposed to be a technocrat. That is what I can answer to in a reasonable way. The accuracy, that is, obviously, it's a cornerstone for the credibility of the whole system. If there is no accurate data, whatever the instrument is, we can forget about it because we do not get the information out of the system we are looking for. Now, the problem is that the register, as it functioned for the last 3 years, was purely voluntary, and consequently the whole checking of the data has been done, let's say, not in a very rigorous way, because the consequences were very, very limited then in terms of sanction mechanism. At the moment, I have to explain to you that we are in a kind of intermediate period. We have put in place a new register with new requirements. People are supposed to update until the end of this month. We have already, the whole system, as you know, is based on outside scrutiny. For us in the Commission, and as a joint secretariat of the Transparency Register, which I coordinate, it would virtually be impossible to check all the data proactively ex ante before putting the data into the system. Even with 50 or 100 people, you would not be able to do that in a correct manner. So there is a minimum ex ante check regarding the eligibility criteria, and that is basically, in terms of figures at the moment, there is 1 up to 2 colleagues working on that full time, and in terms of a very first relatively superficial check, that is feasible. But in the future, there will be if we go down the route of something more mandatory, the checking by the scrutiny by the outside world, by the NGO community and others, is an inherent and integral part of the system. That means it's not only the onus on the Joint Secretariat, it's the onus on the world outside there. That's the whole system of transparency, to come back to us with complaints about the accuracy or question marks regarding the accuracy of the data, and then we can investigate and follow up on it. So there we are still in a learning phase, and it is true, obviously, that with the system we have at the place, we are not sufficiently equipped to do that in a fully fledged way, and once we have a mandatory register, all this has to be revisited too.
Maybe one last point then from our side, sort of on the current registration form. So as Mr. Krüger said, all organizations were invited to update their registration over the last 3 months. The deadline is just about to expire. We, of course, have submitted a new declaration as well, so I'm somewhat familiar with the process now. I think our feedback on this can basically be that when it comes to the text fields of what information can be provided, I think we're relatively happy with what is there. If someone goes into the registration process with the right mindset of wanting to publish accurate and meaningful information, that is absolutely possible. Then, of course, the question is, do all organizations approach it like that? The only thing that we can still criticize is when it comes to the financial data. We see in other systems in Canada, in the US, where there's either monthly or quarterly reporting of the lobbying spend, because for some lobbyists as well, given certain campaigns, given certain legislative files, there can be quite important spikes just before an important vote in the plenary or something like that. The way the current transparency register at the EU level approaches this, all financial data is basically for the last closed financial years, so that in many cases you get the information sort of with a year and a half delay. And then basically to see that whatever, let's say, Philip Morris came in with quite a high number of lobbyists when the tobacco directive was negotiated, to learn that from the transparency register you have to wait a year and a half still after the vote, when of course everything is done and decided, and there's no way anymore to influence a certain file.
I was going to round up, but I'm feeling generous, so one last question.
Okay, I wanted to follow up on what Mr. Krüger was saying, because I do understand that, sorry, my name is Paul de Klerk, Friends of the Earth Europe, and also a steering group member of Alter EU. I do understand that it's not possible for the Commission to scrutinize every possible registration. At the same time, I think the answer, we cannot do that ourselves, and we rely to a large extent on civil society, is a bit too easy, because with Alter EU we've been doing these kind of checks almost every year. And sometimes within half a day we are able to find out at least 10 to 15 absolutely very ununderstandable mistaken cases. And we've also had Mr. Šefčovič, who said a number of times 2 years ago that the Commission will be much more active in scrutinizing the data. So we would like to see a bit more stronger guarantees that this is going to improve. And I think an important guarantee could be that the staff of the Secretariat is really expanded, so that there are more resources available. Thank you.
Well, I think that's probably a very good place to leave it, because our next panel, and we will have Commissioner Timmermans here, so we will be talking about the practical elements of how do you put a mandatory register in place and what that might look like. Pam, what's the finish?
Just a final tiny word. For those of you who are interested to know what we do discover when civil society goes through the register and tries to see what's going on and whether or not the information is accurate, Alter EU has recently produced this report in January, which contains wonderful examples of how data is missing, how there is outdated financial information, how clients are listed as confidential, etc., etc. So it's all here.
Okay, thank you very much to our panellists. We'll take a short break and come back to you in just a minute. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to resume. Commissioner Timmermans will be with us around about 11 o'clock, but first we're going to hear from our parliamentary representatives. So this will be a little bit different. We will have proper speeches, and then we will have a little bit more discussion again. Whether we will have time for questions and answers with the Commissioner remains to be seen. We'll see where it goes. But thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over now to our MEPs. So Sylvie, you're going to go first.
Thank you. I'm not going to deliver an actual speech. I'm going to focus on a number of items, since the idea here is to have an exchange of views and not to have proper speeches. Now, let me focus on a number of points. First of all, let me tell you this. Progress has been made over the last years, and I think we can be very happy about this progress. I think that it is important, of course, to be highly critical, but to be aware of what has been achieved and what is still being achieved. So progress has been made. I think that this was absolutely key and a response to what is being requested by EU citizens on the way decisions are made here in the EU. That is, achieving a maximum of transparency and ethics. That this way of having access to that information is, of course, absolutely legitimate. This is something that I wanted to say before actually focusing on the topic of the day, and we are supposed to talk about the increase of the number of registrants in this panel, even though I think that at the end of this month we're going to see a decrease in the number of registration because of this update. I think that we are talking about 2,000 groups that are going to leave the register, and I think we should think about who did not update what was required. Now, something else, I think this is also at the heart of our discussion today regarding the number and the quality of registrants. Of course, we should aim at having access at a maximum of information, that is, a maximum of groups registering. this goes hand in hand, of course, and here again, this might be very difficult because we know about there are many lobbyists concerned, potentially concerned, and we do not know whether we are going to be able to target all representative groups. But there is something that we should keep in mind. It is the absolutely necessity to have high quality data, high quality information within the register. And I think that there is really room for improvement here. This is something that has been said already regarding the financial or funding data in the latest register and the reformed register. We have seen that the data provided was really poor. I mean, and it's really difficult to check that type of data, that type of information. So, of course, we should talk about the quantity of data, but, of course, quality of data. Now, I don't know how long I have, but I would like to know about what Mr. Timmermans has to say about this when he joins us today. But with President Juncker, they made the decisions about the deadlines about with the DGs, and but I think that we should also talk about what is being requested by MEPs, and also how we should go about focusing other levels of staff. I mean, we should not only aim at high-level staff when talking about agreements, financial agreements. We know for sure that there are many people who are part and parcel to the discussions and negotiations, and those exchanges of views are being carried out at very different levels. Not only the high level of staff. I think that we should also bring that on board. And then there is something else that I would like to discuss with you. This is, of course, we have the issue of the validity, the quantity of information, the quality of the information included, quality of the control that is being carried out, and we know that there is very limited staff carrying out this monitoring task. But there is also something else, two things, and I guess that Dennis de Jong will talk about these points later. First of all, the incentives that could be defined. We are currently working on a note that will be discussed and decided next May at the level of the European Parliament, so next May, on those incitative measures or incentives that could encourage groups to register and this would mean access to or priority access to specific information. Those groups would be informed in advance. It's the carrot method, if you like, to encourage people registering. And then also talking about the European Parliament, we should also change our tack regarding legislative footprint. There's a number of things that are being done in an empirical manner vis-à-vis this legislative footprint and the communication about the way position papers are being prepared. I think that we should again make progress on this very specific topic, and this could be a way of meeting the needs and expectations of our EU citizens. But this would mean a different frame of mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and also a big thank you to Sylvie for what she said already. I think, first of all, I think everybody knows that this meeting and, in general, our work in this area is not directed against lobbyists as such. I mean, we all appreciate getting information, but I think Transparency International, for example, wrote it down very clearly only recently that it has to be fully transparent, it has to be balanced, and there has to be access for all stakeholders. And that's a bit the criteria, and of course we should handle with conflicts of interest whenever they are there. That's the background of what we want to do here. We want to create transparency. Brussels is far away from many citizens, and it's already very complicated if you want to find out how Brussels works. If you then have this idea that behind the scenes there's a lot going on that you don't know about and that's kept from you, that's not good for the decision making in Europe, that's not good for the citizens. Now the question I think I was asked to answer here is what the European Parliament can do in the short term to ensure increased registration of lobbyists. I think that apart from practical measures, we certainly have to keep up pressure. That's why we have a meeting here, that's why Vice President Timmermans is here, and that I think that interaction is always a way of pressure. We also have now in the new legislature an intergroup on transparency and integrity that I co-chair together with Eddie Schlein. That will be a constant group network of pressure to keep this moving. And there are about 90 MEPs who have actually joined the intergroup already, and I know there are a lot more out there who are sympathetic to our work. The second thing is that we have official measures like hearings, and we have a rapporteur, Sven Giegold, who was already mentioned, who will deal with these issues. So keep up the pressure can be done through a variety of measures, and to give you one example, in the Budgetary Control Commission committee of which I'm a member, when we had the discharge of the Commission, I asked Catherine Day, the Secretary General of the Commission, can you please explain me the definition of mandatory in the mandatory lobby register and transparency register rather? And she said, no, we don't know yet, but now we have Commissioner Timmermans here, so maybe we get to know a bit more. But that sort of pressure we can do from the Parliament. And then we can take practical measures, and I shall be short because I see that Frans Timmermans has already arrived. The first thing that every MEP who is in favour of transparency can do is keep track of his or her own contacts with lobbyists. Now that sounds easy, but I can tell you that even there you meet certain practical problems. We are still discussing at the moment with the service in the European Parliament, the information service, whether I can put that type of information on the European Parliament's website where I have my own page, more or less, but that's an automatic page. That's a page filled by the Secretariat. But can I also use it to indicate which lobbyists have approached me, which have I seen, what type of documentation did I get, precisely the issues that came to the fore. That's still pending at the moment, and I'm sure that it will be one of the measures that will be discussed in the Bureau. The second thing, the legislative footprint, that would be another thing. I have produced reports in the Parliament, and I used part of the text to indicate the lobbyists that I've spoken to, if they had an influence on my report. But at the moment, when I do that, it takes text away from the substance of the report, because we have, believe it or not, we have a maximum of characters we can use for each report, and that has to do with translation costs, etc. So what we agreed during the previous mandate was that there would be a template for an annex, so to speak, to a report where you can, in detail, and as long as you want, indicate the contacts with lobbyists that had an influence on your report. That still needs to be decided. I sent a letter, I think around the European elections, or just before the elections, to President Schulz, saying that we had agreed that this template would be there. His answer was, well, I don't think so, or I don't know, and in any case there's no formal record of that. Until this very day I don't have that template. That's the type of thing, in addition to measures that have already been taken on badges, access to the buildings and the type of measure that Sylvie mentioned on priority given to information. So I think the set of pressure and practical measures, that's really what we should be doing in the Parliament. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You missed a little bit this morning, but you can imagine what we spoke about, I'm sure. We had a lot of discussion on qualitative versus quantitative register, and I know you're going to tell us what's changed with the new Commission. So I will hand straight over to Vice President Timmermans then.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the good news. Last week, Transparency International ranked the Commission second out of 19 European countries and institutions on transparency issues. And now I want to try and make sure that next time we're first. But I think in this area, the Commission has actually outperformed many other European institutions, and I hope that Parliament will follow suit on a number of issues, and I'll go into them shortly. We are working on creating bigger transparency on, for instance, the experts who are appointed by the Commission on expert groups. So everybody knows exactly what their CVs are, what their interests are, etc., so that they can be fully accountable in the public sphere. Last November, just after the Commission took up office, we gave a boost to transparency by establishing the rule that all commissioners will only meet organisations and self-employed individuals that are registered on the transparency register. This applies to commissioners, members of commissioners' cabinets and directors general in the Commission. Since then, details of meetings of commissioners and the other people I mentioned are published on the Commission's website. Now information of more than 3,000 meetings altogether has been put online to date, and I have also the personal experience that this leads sometimes to questions by the media. They're saying, we saw you met that and that person, what did you talk about? And I like that sort of approach because it's a different... In the past you would get, in different positions I held, you would get the media asking, we have heard that you might have met this, why, etc. And now, you know, it's fully in the open. So, oh, he's met this and that. Let's ask him why. It creates a completely different dynamic from the start in your relationship with the media. An unprecedented number of lobbyists have signed up to the register since this new approach, more than 1,000 actually, including several major banks and companies, Goldman Sachs, Gazprom, Ryanair, HSBC, Royal Bank of Scotland, Coca-Cola, Heineken. In this way, even though the register remains nominally voluntary, our initiative has given it a mandatory dimension because, you know, if you're not on the register, you can't get access. So that has worked, but we still, I think, there's still room to improve this. And although I know that views are not unanimous on this in the European Parliament, I would still invite the European Parliament to consider to do the same things as far as MEPs is concerned. Why not? Why not have the same approach to the lobbyists you meet, that you publish who you meet, and that you only meet people who are willing to register. It might be an example worth following by the European Parliament, although that's entirely up to the European Parliament. We will be negotiating, the three institutions, an interinstitutional agreement on better lawmaking, and in that I will want to increase transparency, to put, for instance, draft legislation, but also draft implementing acts and delegated acts in the public sphere for a period of time so that it is open for comments by the public. I think that would be a way of increasing transparency. I hope we, since we want registration to be the norm, I hope we can also find an interinstitutional agreement on a mandatory register. I would be very much in favour of that, to work with the three institutions on this. We will make a proposal for this by the end of this year, and I think then we could actually come to an agreement that would bind three institutions. And here we will need to find, and perhaps even there can be some input from you and your experience, everybody in this room today, so that we strike the right balance between being effective but not creating another bureaucratic burden. But I'm sure there are experiences out there that you know of that could be helpful to us. I think it is important to me to ask for meaningful and proportional disclosure of data from registrants, but that we also have optimal data quality, so that it's not just a whole big bunch of data that you cannot access or cannot interpret. That would defeat the purpose. You know, you can drown people in data, and then instead transparency becomes something you announce, but in fact it is not transparent because people cannot wade through all the data you're giving them. So we will need to look at that as well. I think I'll leave it at that, and would like to invite all of you to contribute to making our work even more transparent than it is today.
And possibly more difficult. Now, to your left, we have Aidan O'Sullivan from the Ombudsman's Office and Olivier Hoodman. But Aidan, I'll let you go first. I'm sure you have questions and proposals to put to the Commission.
Yeah, well, lots. Thank you to Ultra EU and to Ms. Guillaume for hosting the event. Lobbying and transparency has been a big focus of the Ombudsman, who's in office now in 18 months, Emily O'Reilly. She would have liked to be in here. She's on the way to Warsaw. Yeah, just to start, to repeat, you know, a huge amount of progress has been made, and the Ombudsman definitely recognises a sea change with the new Commission, let's say. A huge amount of progress has been made because of a lot of good work of people in this room, but, you know, as the Vice President, First Vice President has said, the Commission is better than most Member States. It is better than most EU institutions. And including agencies. So, you know, a lot of progress has been made. We would say, though, however, that the Commission should be the best. The Commission is the executive. It is the leader. It should be the leader in the European Union. And it should be the best. The European Union, unfortunately, does not yet, let's say, have the popular legitimacy of citizens of Europe, and then, even more so, needs to be, let's say, the gold standard. In some ways, maybe it's not as good as America or Canada, etc., but in some ways, we're far ahead of them as well. It depends. But let's say, you know, there's a lot of progress has been made. We recognise that. And that's for sure, and definitely the new Commission has made several progressive steps. However, there's huge areas of concern, as we know. I'm here 5 years in Brussels, and we know, everyone knows, for example, the tobacco lobbyists are one of the biggest spenders in Brussels, but I've never seen a tobacco lobbyist lobbying. No Philip Morris events, no you know, meetings and etc., but we know they're the biggest spenders. Exactly, yeah. So it's really interesting, and as one of my first weeks in Brussels, in Place Lux, I met a tobacco lobbyist over a drink, and they said, "Oh, we're the best lobbyists in Brussels." And I didn't know what he meant then, but I do now. They're very, very, very sophisticated lobbyists at a very high end. And we actually have an ongoing inquiry with the Commission about tobacco lobbying, which I think the Commission is working quite well on. We all have mobile phones. We were told last year by the Parliament and the Commission that our mobile phone charges were going to be cut, etc., etc. Fantastic policy. And then, behind closed doors, the Council just decided to negate this. What lobbying happened there was not transparent. Which Member States voted which way? It was all unanimous, etc., etc. No transparency on a major policy issue, which people went out and campaigned on. So definitely the other institutions have a lot to do on some of these issues. The transparency register, we want it to be mandatory. We would like to see the legislation-based mandatory register. However, we do support this initiative by the Commission. We wish it well. We hope it works. But if it doesn't, we need to move to legislation. There is debate about the legal basis, etc. But, you know, 3 changes do come every few years, and let's prepare for the next one. But we welcome this new initiative by the Commission. Definitely the Parliament and Council have a lot of hard questions to answer and to look in the mirror themselves. We know that. And on the Council side, it's very difficult, because a lot of lobbying happens in the Perm Reps and in the national capitals. Unfortunately, we don't have a mandate over the Perm Reps and national capitals, but this is a big issue. The Transparency Register, we would like to see it as a centre of the lobbying universe, technically. So, obviously, the register is just one part of transparency. There's a huge amount of areas, delegated acts, implementing acts, trade negotiations, regulatory cooperation, impact assessment board, etc., etc. All these areas of influence, meetings, of course, expert groups, they should all tie in technically into the Transparency Register. So it's very important we have a very, very good, strong Transparency Register. It's important we get more resources in the Parliament and Commission to the Transparency Register to make sure it is top class, and then it can be the centre of that universe. We have an ongoing inquiry with the Commission, 2 ongoing inquiries actually about expert groups, to the transparency and balance. We recommend that it's mandatory that if you sit on an expert group you are on the Transparency Register, and they should be linked again technically back to that. We hope that happens. DG Agri do it already, which is good to see. On TTIP, for example, on the trade negotiations, the stakeholder group, 5 years ago, I think, I asked one of the biggest Irish lobbyists, the Irish Farmers Association, why don't you register? And they, basically didn't listen. But when they wanted to be involved in TTIP negotiations and the Commission said you have to register, they registered pretty quick. So, on these groups we would like everything to tie into the Transparency Register. We have an ongoing inquiry as regards revolving doors with the Commission, very, very important. Again, extremely influential. If you know anybody in Washington DC, revolving doors issue is probably the one most important areas of where you can influence public administration. We believe it's one of the sanctions if an official leaves, or a commissioner, and they do not follow the recommendations of the Commission, because sometimes they just ignore the Commission. They're making so much money in the private sector, they don't care about their pension or about their... And they then make sure you take them off the register. They cannot operate. You should not be able to operate in Brussels as a lobbyist if you're not on the register. The meetings, we welcome very much so. Now that the Commission is proactively publishing the meetings is very, very, very good. We would like to see more detail, for example, the names of people who they're meeting. We'd like to see that expanded downwards. The really, really good lobbyists, like the tobacco industry, they know exactly who the decision maker is. And sometimes that's not the Commissioner or the Cabinet. Sometimes it's a head of unit or a Director General, or etc., who really knows the dossier. So let's expand that downwards. And finally, just to mention, of course, if you have any complaints, well, first of all, there's hopefully a good complaints handling mechanism on the register. The Ombudsman recommended that a number of years ago. But if you're not happy with how the Parliament and Commission are dealing with the Transparency Register, you can come to the Ombudsman and make a complaint.
Okay, thank you very much. We've talked a lot about mandatory, and making things legally mandatory. If something is mandatory in practice, does it really matter? Just to move the discussion on a little bit, Olivier, let me turn it to you.
Yes, thanks a lot. Indeed, I would like to ask Mr. Timmermans a couple of questions about the approach that the Commission has in mind, is going to propose to the Parliament. It's true that the Commission is doing better than Member States, where the debate about lobbying has not been taken place for so long. But there are some real problems with the current register. We've discussed it in the first session. We've heard it in this session too. Many lobbies not signing up. The law firms, many large multinational companies still not signed up. And the problem with the unreliable and often very limited information in the register, including Goldman Sachs. They did sign up. But then if you see what's in the register, what they actually disclose about their lobbying, it's very limited, and it's far from truthful, I would argue. So the question is what the Commission specifically has in mind to tackle these problems. The European Parliament, in its resolution before the elections, called for a legislative proposal. The Alter EU Coalition also has been proposing this as the best option, because we know that it has worked in Canada, in the US. It has worked to make all lobbyists, all lobbies, all lobby actors sign up. And it has worked in delivering comprehensive and reliable information, because there are sanctions when you have a legally binding lobby transparency system. So the Commission, I interpret, is proposing an interinstitutional agreement in which the different institutions will come forward with different measures to make it more difficult for lobbyists to lobby without being registered. So that's a different approach, and of course, this could work. It depends, I think, very much on how ambitious the Commission will be in making it work. So my questions are on that specifically. The measures taken in December, I think it was, with limiting meetings with commissioners and the top officials only to those who are registered. Is the Commission planning to expand that to cover all those officials who are being lobbied? At the moment, there are many lobby meetings, many more lobby meetings with those who are not covered by these new initiatives than the top 300 that are covered. So for this to become de facto mandatory, properly functioning, it would have to be expanded very ambitiously. So is that the plan from the Commission side? And on the reliability of the data and actually getting all the relevant information disclosed, what kind of sanctions does the Commission have in mind for this to work? So the Secretariat of the Register can have some tools to force those who are registered to really do what they're supposed to do. Those were my questions.
So I'm now in a position to have to answer these questions?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I am a pragmatist in these issues, and I want to achieve results. And I know for sure that if we would take this down the legal road, it would take many, many years to get first Parliament to agree and then Member States to agree on this, given the hugely different approaches in Parliament, frankly, but certainly in Member States to the issue. So I think if you really want to achieve results within the mandate of this Commission, I think we would explore the option of coming to an interinstitutional agreement between the three institutions, where every institution retains the responsibility for what they do within the institution, but perhaps we could benchmark what we do to what other institutions do. So I'm sure that if the Commission is very progressive with this, it's probably going to be more difficult for Parliament to stay behind. And perhaps then jointly we can convince Council to do more in this area. So I do believe this approach of looking for an interinstitutional agreement is going to yield results sooner than if we were to go down the road of coming up with a formal legal proposal for this. The administrative procedures or measures could then be established by each institution individually, and the Commission would certainly be willing to look for ways of sanctioning lobbyists who don't register and then meet Commission officials. The sanction would take the form of withdrawal of privileges, which would mean that essentially you would put them out of business because they would no longer get access for a certain period of time or permanently to Commission officials. Now, the last issue you raised is to what extent should we enlarge the register and the people who fall under the register within the Commission services. And this is a complicated issue, and I don't really have a definite answer today. But what I do strongly believe, and I will certainly talk to them about this at length, that Directors General are responsible for their DG to assure that their officials are completely transparent and open to them about who they talk to. If this doesn't work, then we will have to look for other ways. But I want to be in a dialogue with the Directors General to look if we can organise that way, because it is absolutely true that Directors General rely on their services, as the Commission does, as the Commissioners do, to provide the right information. And it's absolutely true that they are at head of unit level and sometimes at officials level being lobbied on by members of the European Parliament extensively, but also by other interest groups, external lobbies. And I don't have a panacea here or a definite answer, and I'm very much looking forward to input from stakeholders in this debate. But I also want to avoid that we turn this whole thing into such a huge administrative construction that nobody can actually see what's really happening. And you know, if you can drown people in data these days, as you know very well, and we have to strike the right balance. But I'm open to a debate about this, and I want to make sure that we rank first next time when there is a list in Transparency International of European countries and institutions.
Well, you did mention sanctions for not registering, which of course is a nice step forward. But I mean, what about sanctions for misinformation? I mean, in my line of work as a journalist, sometimes you find entries that are complete works of fiction. I mean, how open are you to the idea of sanctioning misinformation, and then how do you go about identifying when they've lied, lobbyists have lied on the register? I mean, because that happens.
Well, if you lie to me, you're no longer welcome in my office. And I think it would be good if they lied on the register, that they would be hit by the same sanctions as if they when they don't register.
Merci. Every time we talk about the issue of publishing meetings, and this request from the European Parliament to move towards that, I can say that I felt some suspicion from Mr. Timmermans with regard to the willingness of the Parliament to move forward. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm ready to explain that to you, Madam. Well, we could talk about expert groups if you want to talk about suspicions or information difficult to achieve, to obtain. But when there are mutual suspicions, the general rule in this institution is that we turn to the third one. So please do not put any suspicions on the Parliament. I think that this is the wrong way to move forward. On the other hand, I think that one has to be realistic. You used to be an MP in your country, so the issue of the mandate is one, but it's not mandatory. And the second issue is to reach a majority within the Parliament in order to achieve an agreement. And let me be frank with you. Given my contacts with some of my colleagues, some of vice presidents, these transparency issues, even if in general they are welcome, when it comes to practice, having a legal footprint, for instance, or publishing meetings, things are a bit more complicated, and not for suspicious reasons, necessarily. So I think that we would reach a dead end if we keep on talking about suspicions between institutions. So as far as I'm concerned, and this is the message that I would like to convey to you today, and I hope that you will share this with you, is that mindsets have to change, practices have to change, stakes have to change. We need to look at objectives. And targets. And this change of mindsets, in my opinion, must be part of our daily activities, within our mandate, within what we want to achieve, what we want to give to our citizens. I'm also thinking about the meaning behind all this. I heard some people talking about high access to all information. I fully agree with this, and I'm in favor of such a measure. But having said this, one has to be aware of the fact that looking for as much information as possible doesn't prevent us from giving meaning to the information, to our policies, to our priorities within our mandates. So I just wanted to mention that. And now I would like to say a few words about those incentives and measures. It's like a chain reaction, and what we already have in the interinstitutional agreements must be implemented in facts. Access to buildings, for instance, if you look at security measures in our buildings today, yes, it is quite meaningful. Then organizing some events in our premises, like this meeting today, could also be positive. Those who attend hearings, are they in the register or not? I don't know. And this is something that those who would like this register to function properly are expecting. So there's still some room for improvement, and we need to do that to proceed to a shift of mindsets.
What Sylvia said, or
I have a few additional questions,
yeah.
if that's allowed.
We'll rack them up.
So maybe it's easier for the Commissioner to answer them together. First of all, I wanted to say that we are in here together, but we shouldn't be, and that's what I tasted a bit with Frans Timmermans when he said, you know, we are number second, but you're not sufficient. I mean, it's 53 out of 100. It's insufficient at school. Huh? So you have not passed the test. None of us have passed the test. But the second thing is, so we have homework. That's what I want to say. And the second thing is that, that's what I said before you had arrived, Brussels is far away from the people. So for us, transparency is even more important than for a national government, I think, because there are more balances of power at national level than here in Brussels. That's why this whole discussion has come about. We saw that the lobbyists from, let's say, the paid lobbyists from the big industries have better access, or used to have better access to Brussels than others. And it's to counter that for us we need to make an extra effort. Now, second point I want to make, the interinstitutional working group. I can understand the pragmatic approach of Frans Timmermans in this respect. I don't think any of us have a problem with an interinstitutional working group and arrangements for the time being, but we also have Guy Verhofstadt writing a report on treaty change. I think we should also focus on that it becomes a point in treaty change that we get better rules on transparency, and that there is a legal basis that's easier to use for a register. And so I think we can get along with an arrangement, but also I don't think I want to stop progress if the Council, for example, in that arrangement was the blocking factor. I think that there should always be an option that we push through as Parliament and Commission together, even if the Council is lagging behind there, because we see that, for example, with access to documents, that it's really the Council also blocking some of the progress that we want to make. Third point, a quick one, expert groups. I just wanted to say that we're not there yet. We're now doing an official study of the European Parliament about the expert groups, but it was very difficult, and I really don't understand why, to get up-to-date information from the Commission. The Commission kept referring to the old documents that we had received. The researchers have now finally received the up-to-date information, and now they will produce the results. But I think staffing in this area of expert groups and the mandate for the Secretary General to enforce upon the DGs the rules that are being created is essential to make progress. And also, I wonder, when are the rules going to be evaluated? I thought that this year was the year that they should be evaluated, the rules on expert groups, but I don't seem to hear anything from the Commission. Final observation, when I hear about it's very difficult to enforce also the rules that hold now for commissioners on transparency in respect of their contacts with lobbyists to civil servants, and we do that through the DGs, that's a bit difficult for me to understand, because if you want, as DG, a report on the contacts of your staff with lobbyists, and you want to check that, I'm sure that that reporting must then be in writing somehow. So if it's in writing, why not publish it then?
Okay, you've got quite a lot of questions there. I will let you choose.
I'm used to that in this august building. And that's in the nature of the relationship between the Commission and the European Parliament. Let me start with that. The European Parliament always asks things of the Commission. And if the Commission then asks things of the European Parliament, sometimes the European Parliament gets a bit irritated. I know that. That's my experience in the first 6 months. But I think it's not wrong for me to say to the European Parliament, yes, you're right to ask things of us, and yes, we need to do even better than we do today. But hey, European Parliament, why don't you do what we're doing? And then when I ask that, some members of the European Parliament are irritated with me that I ask them, why don't you do what we're doing? One member of the European Parliament who is very much engaged in this issue from the EPP party said to me, we have been elected, you have not, so we don't have to do the same register than you have done. I don't follow the logic of that reasoning, frankly. By the way, I was elected 6 times. I don't know how many times she was elected, but if with all due respect, and I know it is not done, that one institution, at least it's not done from the Commission to say anything about the European Parliament, I think we would be better off if we are in an alliance doing our utmost on both sides and stimulating each other to do this. Because for the outside world, there is no difference between Parliament and Commission and Council, etc. So we are in this together. There is no competition between institutions on this. And that's why I humbly ask the European Parliament perhaps to do the same as we have done so far, and that would already improve the situation in the European Parliament. Having said that, it is absolutely right that every institution has its own responsibility. And in an institutional agreement, as I said before, you have the possibility to go beyond what the other institution does, because I certainly don't want to be held back by Council on what we do on transparency, but I want to try and convince Council to take a few steps forward as well, because I think the biggest problem, it's always easy to blame the absent institution, but the biggest problem here is indeed that the Council has a sort of restraint attitude towards this. Now, again, because I'm sure we will be coming back to this many, many times, on the transparency of meetings of other officials below the level of Directors General. Let's see how this system works. If we can get this to work, and then we'll see if we need to take it beyond that. Again, for me, it's not an issue of hiding things. On the contrary, for me, it's an issue of being efficient. At some stage, you will have to strike a balance, and I'm open to that discussion. It's not a theological issue for me, but at some stage, you also have to protect the people working for the Commission at some level. They are not exposed to the public's eye as people at my level or at high official level. So we'll have to find a way in which we create even more transparency than we have today, without putting people in a vulnerable position when that is not mandated by our requirements of transparency. But again, I want to listen to all stakeholders on these things, and I want to take this very seriously indeed. Now, as far as the expert groups is concerned, I think we are indeed looking into the evaluation of that. We need to look more closely at the declarations of interest to avoid there being a clash of interest in that. But we also have very strong laws and regulations on data protection. So we also have to make sure that when people declare their interest, we are still within the law in terms of protecting their personal sphere and their personal data. So it's also an issue of clearly defining what the limits of the law are in this respect.
Well, we'll not plough into data protection right now. So I see 3 questions in the room. I will let all 3 of you in order ask, and then we will come back because I'm aware of time. So Daniel from Transparency International first.
Thank you very much. So thanks for mentioning already our study. Actually, the report has a few tips and tricks how to be first next time, so you can follow the recommendations. I have two things that I wanted to comment on. You mentioned some of the organizations that have signed up since you took the new measures in December, and you mentioned concretely the case of Goldman Sachs that we discussed in the first session today, where the information that Goldman Sachs provided is honestly speaking meaningless. So in that sense, simple registration can't be the end of the game. It needs to be meaningful registration as well. When it comes to the interinstitutional agreement and how that will come about, what Transparency International would like to see, since it's not going to be a legislative process with all that comes with it, the transparency of the debate, consultation and so on, it would be fantastic that this very important element of your transparency initiative resembles a legislative process as closely as possible, that there is open consultation with civil society, with citizens and so on. You might think about possibly web streaming the meetings, publishing protocols of the discussions, and that we don't see something that resembles the last negotiation of the previous interinstitutional agreement, which happened behind closed doors, and even for MEPs it was sometimes difficult to get the information of what was actually discussed. And finally, you mentioned that we can be drowned in data. And I think that's a very interesting observation. And I mean, you have published now almost 3,000 or just above 3,000 meetings with lobbyists as the Commission overall. Unfortunately, you're doing that on 98 different web pages. There is no proper access to an XML file, for example, where one could get the entirety of those of the information to just, for example, look up how many meetings have there been on TTIP, how many meetings has Google had, or something like that. Right now is absolutely impossible. So I think with sort of a few easy fixes on the website and the database, one could fight that problem of getting drowned in data quite easily. And maybe to make one last comment on IT problems, that Mr. de Jong said that it's very difficult for them to replicate as MEPs the same publication of meetings. My understanding is that the Commission has developed an IT tool to allow all the commissioners and all the directors general to publish their meetings. Maybe it would be a very good outcome of this meeting if you offered to the Parliament to share that IT tool with them so that they can use that as well.
Okay, I'm moving on to Ultra EU, but searchability, I'm 100% with you. That would be lovely for all of us journalists. Go ahead.
Yes, Paul de Klerk, and Alter EU. Also on the Goldman Sachs issue, additional to what Daniel was saying, Goldman Sachs registered for a lobby budget lower than €50,000. I think all of us in the room will probably agree that this is not realistic. Alter EU filed a complaint about it, so you earlier said that if someone lies to me, I will not speak with them anymore. I hope if the complaint is found justified that you will make sure that Goldman Sachs is actually receiving appropriate sanctions. On the second issue is the mandatory nature. 8 years ago, when we spoke with Commissioner Kallas, who launched the lobby register, he said, we need to do it on a voluntary basis because legislation takes too long. 4 years ago, when we spoke with Commissioner Šefčovič, he said, we can't do legislation because it takes too long. Now we're here and we hear the same argument again. I think I would really like to plead to consider a dual approach for the Commission. We as Alter EU, we fully support the short-term initiative within IIA that you are proposing, and we will be providing concrete input of further incentives that you can propose, and we've been doing that. But I think it is also important that the Commission also looks at the long term, also to fulfill what the Parliament wants. The Parliament still is arguing for a mandatory lobby register. So we would also ask you to start the process for a mandatory lobby register, so we don't have to hear in 5 years from now, when there is still a lot of maybe problems with the register, that again it will take too long. Last question is, would you be willing to expand the measure that you have now for the higher level of civil servants, the cabinet members and the commissioners and the heads, not to speak with people who are not in the register? Would you be willing to extend that to all commission staff that are involved in lobbying? Because I think the vast majority of lobbying does not happen at the top level, but happens at the level below. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think you've actually already sort of dealt with that last point, so we'll take your question on dual approach. And then finally, the lady over here, if we can keep it brief because we're already delaying.
My name is Florence Bertoletti. I'm the director of the Smoke-Free Partnership, which was the organization that led the campaign around the very controversial, as you know, Tobacco Products Directive in the past 5 years. My question is going to be a difficult one, and it is related to the new rules applying possibly beyond cabinets and commissioners. And it's related to the negotiations that currently the Commission has started with Philip Morris with regards to the agreement that was agreed 10 years ago to fight illicit trade. Now, on this issue, at a time where Philip Morris International is actually suing the Commission on the Tobacco Products Directive, there is currently no information whatsoever on the reasons why these agreements are currently being renegotiated, the term of finishing. So in the interest of time, I will cut it short. My question is very simple. Has there been an impact assessment of these agreements? Why are the reasons why the Commission has entered into negotiation with a company which is actually suing them? And what are the terms? And could we have a bit more transparency about this?
Okay, I think we'll probably try to avoid getting specifically into the terms of one case and one company because we would be here all day. But if we come back to the first question about sort of searchability and how many IT problems we have, and then maybe the dual approach and perhaps in general the relationship with the Commission, with companies that either it's investigating or that they're suing and so on.
On Goldman Sachs, if there is a complaint, as there is clearly here, we will follow up on this, and if this is not correct, it will be taken up with Goldman Sachs, and if it turns out that they misinformed us, there will be measures taken by the Commission. So I'll make sure that we follow up on that. I want to take away one potential misunderstanding. If you have an interinstitutional agreement, it does not preclude the possibility of a mandatory register. You can come, each individual institution can agree in an interinstitutional agreement to have a mandatory register. So you don't necessarily need legislation to get a mandatory register. So let there not be any misunderstanding on this. So in that sense, if the goal is to get a mandatory register, we might be able to achieve it with an interinstitutional agreement. And it's certainly going to be much quicker than if we go through the legislative procedure. But I don't exclude the possibility of putting on the table a proposal for legislation at some stage if the interinstitutional agreement approach does not yield the results we are looking for. On the database, I understand. I understand it is complicated with all these different databases, but the reason why we have this is because I decided when we went down this road, I decided to put the responsibility directly there where it belongs, and that is with the individual members of the Commission, the individual DGs, the individual cabinets. Because if you centralise this, then you put the responsibility in somebody else's hands. And I want the public, I want the outside world to be able to go directly to those responsible for the register. And I said it clearly to all my colleagues, if you do this, if you don't do this correctly, it is you who is going to be accountable for this. Having said that, if we can look for tools to make it more generally accessible, we will certainly not avoid that. But I don't want to centralise the responsibility for this, because I think it needs to be with the individual who has this responsibility. The IT tool, I don't know if there's any rule why we couldn't share it with the Parliament. I don't know. There might be IT proprietary things or ownership. I don't know. But the Commission is obviously happy to assist the European Parliament if this tool we use is useful for the European Parliament. Again, the question was repeated of to what level. The logic behind, apart from the one argument that administrative burden, the logic behind cabinets and DGs is because they are, at the end of the day, the ones responsible for giving policy advice to the Commission, to the College and to individual commissioners. So that's where the policy advice materialises. How this policy advice comes into being is something of the internal kitchen of each DG, but the responsibility lies with them, so transparency should be also with them. I do not exclude that we would evolve the system at a later stage, but I want to see where we are on this in a couple of months or in a year, and see how it works. Then finally, the Philip Morris issue. I think this. I don't know exactly what the agreements entail. They are dealt with by Olaf at this stage, I believe, and I will have to inquire with Commissioner Georgieva, who's responsible for this. I can't give you a concrete answer, but I can refer to her, and she will give you, I'm sure, an answer on that.
Okay, well, I think we've solved all the problems that we have in Brussels now.
That would be nice.
Final remarks, because I'm, as I say, aware of time. So just maybe each of our panellists can keep it quite brief, and then we'll let you go.
Yeah, I have to, because the President's waiting for me for another interinstitutional agreement.
Send him our best.
Will.
Okay. All right, then. Everyone's off, so we will take a short break, and then we'll come back and tackle the thorny issue of whether or not the Council will be involved, and there'll be a lot to say on that, I'm sure. Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
They just walked up.
Okay. Busy people, I suppose. finish at 2:30.
Madame Guillaume, elle reste Ah non, 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 ils ont mis de l'autre côté.
Oui,
non, non,
mis de l'autre côté.
je lui ai enlevé, ok.
Si
Et ici, ils ont changé.
C'est pas en moi.
Vous venez ici.
Oui.
Oui, ok, ça je vais enlever. Voilà.
For the rest of it's very good. Your questions have been very good.
I quite like it. I'll be able to write an article about it
yeah,
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you lie to me, you're not welcome in my office.
That was a great quote,
good lie,
wasn't it?
isn't it?
Yeah.
Right,
As a signal, it's not a bad thing to say, I think.
No, I think it's...
But okay, in practice, what he then offers is limited. But still,
it's a good enough line in for a story.
Sure.
Yeah. So, who's sitting where?
Hi.
Where am I? You're right. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Yeah, you're clear. What's your name?
Hello, how are you?
Good. You tweaked the name when I spoke.
Well,
I think Jennifer Baker sounds good.
Sounds very formal, doesn't
Very
it? Yeah, I should just have put Brussels geek on there. Fine. That's
So you're going to throw out some questions, is that right?
We're going to try and talk about the Council and Member States in this. We haven't really tackled that, and
yeah.
Mr. Tim needs a bit of council bashing. And so,
a bit of council bashing. There's a bit of council bashing in our report.
So let's do that.
It's a bit unfortunate, but still opportunities to improve.
Well, you know, I felt like saying to him when he was there, when we can work together, the Parliament and the Commission. Good luck persuading all the Member States one at a time. Okay, well, perhaps we'll move along swiftly because time is, as always, getting away from us. So in this panel, we're going to try and talk a little bit more about the Council, the Member States, how they can be also brought into the loop. Mr. Timmermans seemed to think that was a particularly big challenge. So, first of all, we have a representative from the Latvian presidency. So, Inga, I will let you set out your stall first, and then we'll move on to more discussion.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Obviously, I represent the institution that has been absent from this discussion from the very first moment. Maybe I give an introduction of myself just to make sure that the Council, as an absent institution, makes its point clear. I chair the Working Party on General Affairs that is responsible for the file. And not only the Presidency is being present in this room, but also the Council Secretary General and also some of our delegations. So I would like to make it explicitly clear that the Council has been following this discussion very closely and has been present in this debate. But the colleagues are not here to hear us, so we will let them leave with their assumption. What happens, yes, there have been attempts to say that the Council is lagging behind on this file, and I think that would be a strong understatement of the situation. The Council has been involved in this debate from the very beginning, but the subject matter that poses most of the difficulties in this situation, again, if we're speaking of the interinstitutional agreement, is the fact that the decision-making, the Council itself is composed of Member States. And the central point of decision-making in Member States are the capitals, which are being covered by national rules. So, in fact, the interinstitutional agreement would cover activities of national officials that are being covered by national rules and reporting to national capitals. And you may imagine that it does spark a debate as to how you govern those issues by means of an agreement. There are some ideas, there is a willingness to see how it may work, but there we would very much depend on the proposal. If we have a chance to discuss, of course we will engage in the discussion. But the internal reflection is ongoing. But again, this is something that is a very interesting point. If there is a legal solution to that, because we know that internal rules of institutions, they may cover EU officials, but they may not cover persons from the outside. And national government assistant officials in that particular case are third parties not covered by agreement. You can cover an institution, you can cover a building, you can cover to some extent the Council Secretary General. But then that, of course, is a question: what is the decision-making focal point in the Council? And that is not the Council Secretary General, although very much appreciated and supported in the whole process. And this is a decision for the Council to make, and it has nothing to do whether the Council does or does not support the transparency. But this is an issue, what legal instrument can address the issue and address it properly.
Okay, well, we're going to have input from the UK and from Slovenia as well, and of course Transparency International again. But let me actually put it over to you, David. Is the issue here is trust? And is there a question to be said, a point to be made that Brussels, being slightly removed from all the other member states, has a bigger burden of convincing people than, say, local, national governments do?
I think that's right.
Press the button.
There is a bigger burden because the European system is less democratic than national systems are. Democracy doesn't really exist very well in most national systems, but it's worse in the EU. So there is a bigger burden. But there is a burden on every member state to improve its transparency. The way in which transparency has decreased over the last 20 or 30 years in almost every member state is a matter of record. And so we do need to be thinking about both the European institutions and the national institutions. So the question about national officials is a very good question. How can the European system relate to those? But also, what can the national member states themselves do about covering their own officials in terms of transparency? We have a very patchy record across the whole of the EU for member states. There are very few member states which have proper, in fact there's none, which have proper lobbying transparency regulations or registers. So that's an argument for both levels.
Okay, let me then, Vid, you're going to tell us, you're going to give us a sort of a national viewpoint or a broader step back?
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me. I'm really privileged to be here as a representative of the Transparency International Slovenia, of a country which scored 55 out of 100 points in the last EU report, the Transparency International lobbying report, which came out first before the Commission, and I'm happy to say that Slovenia is the best among the poor countries, which I'm the opposite of the President of the Vice President of the Commission. I think that we definitely shouldn't be happy about it. I think that the scores just have reflected that problems are still there. I usually use the expression, would we be happy with basically if our child or we would hardly pass the exam in the university. Usually we even wouldn't with 55 out of 100 points. So there is a still long way towards a clean lobbying and shining a light on this area. I would just shortly present what kind of, basically why maybe Slovenia came out of number one in this report, what is maybe better than in other countries, but I have to express that due to the quite holistic and problematic area, which I won't be able basically to explain everything, so I would really emphasize that if you have any questions further on, please do ask them. I will be more clear. I would basically start with that lobbying regulation is being in place for 2010 in the act called Integrity and Prevention of Corruption. It has a provisions. It has a provisions on regulation of the lobbying. It systemically divides different categories of lobbyists, basically professional lobbyists, which need to register. It has to report once a year on their lobbying activities. This is just a fractional lobbyists. In the register is 63 in Slovenia. We have second category is in-house lobbyists, basically who are not registered. And basically a third category, which is not actually a lobbying, but it's an exception of lobbyists. It means that everyone who influences the decision-making process for the enhancement of democracy, rule of law, human rights, is not lobbying. Basically, and it's not registered and it should not be reported. What is different among the different countries in Slovenia, the difference is that the burden of reporting is on lobbied person, on functionaries, mayors, MPs, ministries, and so on and so forth. So each minister, basically, for example, who has a lobbying contact needs to report and needs to issue a one-pager. to the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, which is supervisory body. Within 3 days of reporting contact was issued, either email, either meeting, either telephone call, on the basis of what was the basis of conversation. There is no content on it, what lobbyists would give to the lobbied persons. There is the time and the place and who has met, basically, and these are the information which can be which are publicly available, with certain degree of sheds over it, because due to the privacy of information, private information, the Information Commissioner doesn't allow certain information to be public. Which this is, in our opinion, a good step forward towards a kind of logical also regulation, not to put basically everything into just pool of lobbyists, but we believe that a certain degree of systematization is necessary in order to reduce corruption risk, which are of course different between the types of lobbyists and lobby topics in practice. What is bad, of course, that the implementation of the law is pretty weak, it's pretty poor. Especially due to these exceptions. There is quite a lot of talks about also the ministry last time. If I give you an example, Ministry of Culture gives highly stipulated that yes, of course we are meeting with interest groups, but none of it is consistent with lobbying as it's stipulated in the law. Basically, they are saying that the law on I'm not sure what was it already, but that everyone who is influencing for the democratization or the rule of law on this specific law, which is of course ridiculous, and we cannot believe that it's happened. Also, we have in 4 years around 2,000, 3,000 reporting contacts. We also publish them in a visualized form in our webpage, which we can see that basically, if I give an example, we have 212 municipalities in Slovenia, and with 2 million people. Supervision on lobbying contacts, you can imagine, is practically impossible to a certain degree, and you would be surprised if I say that there are 3 lobbying contacts reported in the last 4 years in 212 municipalities, which can give you basically an example how the law is being enforced in the, for example, local governments. Also, there is a lack of a holistic approach in order to regulate lobbying. Also, we have to confess that there is a certain degree of bureaucracy additional to the lobbied persons, to the functionaries, because they need to issue each and every single report to the Commission in PDFs. There is no IT tool developed in order to put a contact forward. This is being changed as we speak for the last 3 months. Also, if I go a little bit out of just this lobbying regulation, Slovenia is the only one who has the revolving doors mandatory cooling off period also for the MPs. We don't have a single case implemented, so we can see that basically this really doesn't work. Even if it is in the law and forbidden, you really need a holistic and investigative powers of the independent commission to do that, and it really needs a lot of people and human powers to do that. So this is in regards of if we speak about revolving doors policy, and also as it was so much talked about the registry as such. Among the TI movement, we talked about what the registry can bring and what are the benefits or not, and it's all the time the ending point that the registry itself really won't bring the necessary change which we are focusing on and which we wish to see. And my kind of appeal would be that even though that it is a necessary tool to enhance the transparency of lobbying in all the countries. Basically, it's far away of being the only and the last point which has to be done. We have a little bit different approach. Our register is really poor. If for the professional lobbyists, for example, it only stipulates the name and the surname on what areas lobbyist is active. and his address of his firm, basically. Because we don't have a registry for companies, we have a registry for individual people. We have a lobbyist here, which is an individual, and he has to report once a year to the Commission where he lobbied, why, and how much he earned, and so on. I'm happy to answer more questions afterwards, because I believe that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl, let me put a slightly provocative question to you. If the best was only 55 out of 100, and we've got 28 different member states in the Council, then, and we're going to try and standardise it, is that just going to bring the floor even lower so that maybe the good countries will feel, oh, well, such and such isn't really great, they only got 20 out of 100 and we're all in the Council together, so why should we care so much about transparency?
No, I think the question is we set the bar very high deliberately, and the issue is not really about necessarily looking at what your peers are doing, because we know we're starting at a very low base here with all this. It's about having an effective system that's good for democracy and good for public policy making. That should be the first consideration, not whether country X gets 15%. But, there's been a lot of talk about percentages. That's the nature of the reports that Transparency International does. A lot of talk about 55 or 53% being a failing grade. I think it's a bit harsh myself. Maybe that's a reflection of Irish educational standards. I don't know. But I think what is very clear is that the Council in our report gets a very poor 19%. Now, that is not only very clearly a failing grade. I think it's a grade that maybe suggests some remedial classes in transparency, and I think the Council, as we know, not just on lobbying, but in a number of areas, such as the transparency of their working groups in terms of access to documents, probably does need a few remedial classes in transparency as an institution. But I think it would be good when you're dealing with an institution as complex as the Council to get back to a few first principles. And as I said, if it is good for democracy, if it is good for public policy making, that the public knows who is influencing EU legislation and how, well, if you accept that, and I'm not sure that the Council has, then the rest is really for lawyers and for the art of the politically feasible. But that should be the starting point. And it's very clear, and it should be clear to everybody in this room, that the Council is one of the most important legislative institutions, possibly the most important legislative institution. It certainly has a decisive say on most EU legislation. And unless you understand how the Council makes its decisions and who's influencing it, then you don't know why EU legislation is as it is. We at Transparency International know this from first-hand experience. On one of the legislative files that we were campaigning on, at one point the general approach of the Council to that issue, which was proposed by a particular member state and was accepted as the compromise by the Council, was in fact a cut and paste of an industry position, and indeed largely the preference of one particular company. So I think it's important that the public understand this. In fact, it might even be very interesting to other member states in the Council to understand who is influencing member states' positions. So from our perspective, there is absolutely no question about whether the Council should join or not. The only questions are about, one, scope, and secondly, effectiveness. And so just to take scope first, it's a question of who should join, that Inga has referred to as well. So, should it be just the Secretariat General, or should it be perm reps, or should we go further, and should it be all national ministries or national officials? Now, of course, that's a rather knotty and very difficult question. Then there is the question of the effectiveness of the Council joining. And the question is, would the Council joining actually increase the number of registrations on the EU lobby register? And I know there is some scepticism about that. The view is put that in most cases anyway, if you're lobbying here in Brussels, you're going to be lobbying the Parliament and the Commission. And so, and if that means you're probably lobbying the Council as well. Well, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, there are probably many companies who are coming to the issue very late in the day, and they know that the only way to stop something going through is to lobby only the council. Maybe that's a very poor strategy, but I think the question is we don't know that, and we will only know that if we have the council in the system. So there are still very many open questions, as I said, about scope and effectiveness, but the question is what can the council do? And I think that's the issue that we should be discussing now. And I think there's four main things that the council can do. I think the council can, first of all, stop dragging its feet on this issue and behaving in a sense like a sullen teenager who's asked to go on holiday with his parents and observing in sulky silence in many cases. I know that Inga said that the council has been present in the debate, but it doesn't seem like that. And really what we need from the council is a public endorsement of the general direction of travel and the idea that there should be that level of transparency about the council's activities. That's the first thing that they can do. That's very simple. The second thing is if the council has received some legal advice that all of this is impossible or useless, then it should publish that legal advice, and we can all have a debate about the quality of that advice and what the council can do about it. Thirdly, I think that the council should constructively engage with the forthcoming interinstitutional agreement and not dismiss it out of hand and already anticipate the results. I think it should be a strong partner in these negotiations, and it should consider that if it's impossible to get national ministries and lobbying in national capitals covered by this, at the very least that the Secretariat should be in there, and also the EU presidency. So those key central functions, these EU-level functions, should be in the register. That may be symbolic to some extent, but politics is often about the power of symbols. And finally, I think the Council should consider about, I mean, there's maybe too much talk about legal basis, legal instruments. I mean, what can be done on a voluntary measure? What can be done with a coalition of the willing? Now, in our report, we have noted that there are 8 countries apart from the European Commission and the European institutions that have lobby registers. And it seems odd to me that if national officials can concede the point that if you are lobbying on national legislation, then you should be registered and there should be open and transparency about that issue, that when they have their European hat on, they don't think there's any problem with that, and there's no problem with meeting lobbyists who are unregistered. So maybe those countries, as a coalition of the willing, should get together and say, well, we, as a voluntary measure, together with the General Affairs Council, will not meet with lobbyists who are unregistered here on EU business as well.
Okay, Inge, do you want to tackle any of those quite as a representative of the presidency?
Yes, I think I might. Well, again, I will maybe start with one of the last points. I really am a bit puzzled where the rumor comes from that the Council will never join the registry. This seems to be discussed as an implied idea, which it is not. What happens is that the Council has been discussing at length, and these are the issues that I outlined. These are the key issues around which we cannot find a solution, but if there is a good proposal, for example, from the Transparency International, that proposal will certainly be circulated. What the key issue is, and indeed there have been considerations, and it's not excluded that once the negotiations begin, we will be discussing, because these are the two central points that have been identified. This is the role of the Council Secretariat General and the role of the Presidency. But this is the idea, but the solution would have to be discussed, how it works. And again, the key turning point, the red, well, it's not even a red line, but this is the answer that we need to find is the mechanism how it may be done. Because even if we're speaking about the presidency, then the question is, when you look at me, I always ask myself a question, and this is, as a person also working closely with relations with the European Parliament, this is where you feel it most. Whether you speak on behalf of your own delegation or you speak on behalf of the Council. And this is a very fine line, a very fine distinction that you find, and sometimes it's not an easy answer that you give. This is one key question, and if we can find a definition, then why not? This is not being excluded. This is being discussed, and I think, I will repeat it once again, this is not being dismissed, but discussed. When you speak about the role of the Council in the decision-making, I have not heard a single voice around the table, and I have been in Brussels, well, maybe not as long as some of you were, but this is my 4th year, and I have never heard even once that there would be suggestion that the Council delegations are not being lobbied. No way. This is being recognized. What the question is, then, what rules are covering this lobbying? Are those rules being made in Brussels or those rules that are being made in the capital? Because these are not amorphous creatures, Greek gods that are being that are discussing the issue. And as I said, these are members of national administration that sit in Brussels. And if you speak, for example, of a situation that a lobbying organization travels to the capital, would then this situation be covered by an eventual IIA, or that situation be covered by national rules? And why? This needs to be discussed and understood, not dismissed. And that has not been dismissed. And if we speak about the national level, and this is a very interesting point to make, and indeed we need to find a synergy of those rules, because not all national administrations have specific regulation on lobbying. And to go even further, I would say that in some states, lobbying is not permissible. So if you have somebody who is joining on behalf of the Council and recognizing that it's being lobbied, me as a civil servant from the national perspective, coming from a national member state where that lobbying would not be allowed by any means, that civil servant, by simply recognizing being lobbied on behalf of the Council, would fall under the sanction rules of the national administration. Is this something that we can solve? Perhaps we can, but we need to discuss it.
Okay, well, let me sort of play devil's advocate or be a bit blunt. There is another layer with the Council. We all know that the national politicians go back home to their respective capitals and they say, Brussels made me do it. If you sort of have a lot more transparency, presumably in terms of realpolitik, you're making it difficult to pass unpopular laws, which privately many politicians may agree with. So, is that worth bringing into the debate? Is that worth considering? David, or who wants to take that?
I would only make a comment. I'm not an expert on EU lobbying regulation, but I'm an expert for Slovenia, and I can say that also especially in these cases, the representative of the Slovenian in the Council would be under the lobbying regulation. And I have to say, as far as I know, there is not a single contact on that. The problem which comes with, which I see from the outside, when it comes to the lobbying regulation in the European Union institutions, it's definitely the case that it's logical that the regulation is poor if it's poor in the European countries as such. So we need to find a solution and the best way how to regulate both levels. And me personally don't see that should be such a big problem. I don't see why there should be a collusion between national regulation and European regulation, because even though if it comes to that, it should be the contact on one hand should be reported to either under the European regulation, either the national regulation, which by my logic would be perfectly fine. So, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to see, is there anyone in the room who wants to raise any questions or issues? Yes.
Yes, je suis très intéressée.
I'm very much interested by the National Transparency Register. I think this is absolutely necessary, and I have a question to the Slovene representative. I would like to know what the compatibility criteria are within your national register and an EU register. What do you think the common ground would be? And I would like to make a comment as well. There's a very efficient tool called Who is Who. And if you look for somebody using that tool, and I'm talking about the European Parliament, if you look for an MEP or a Director General, you can find on this website the contact details of that person. And I would like to have the same tool called Who is Who Lobbying, and then you would have the name of the commissioner, commission representative, European representative, a council representative, and the lobbies they're in contact with, maybe with the link with the national lobby groups that they got in touch with. And I don't think that it would be very problematic to set this up from an IT point of view. It could be quickly done.
On your second point already, and I don't want to just get into only talking about Slovenia, so perhaps you will quickly tackle the first question, but then I'd maybe like to hear David's point of view on what's from the UK as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. Basically, there is quite a lot of synergy between the registries, but our registries is because of the different system of reporting it. It's not the system on lobbying regulation. It's not put only on the registry because only professional lobbyists need to register. There is different registries or databases on the basis of lobbying contacts produced by the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, which is a supervisory authority. And it's publicly available, all the list of contacts which are reported by the lobbied persons for functionary ministries and so on and so forth. And at the same time, there is a database of reports produced by lobbyists, professional lobbyists. But as I said, when we look at the statistics, we had report in 2013. We maybe I'm going to slightly, it's just a ballpark of number, around 1,000 lobbying contacts was reported in 2014. Out of it, only around 40 were made by professional lobbyists. This can give you an overview of how the lobbying is being conducted and what the gray area, how the biggest gray area in lobbying in Slovenia. What I want to say is that we have also the professional lobbyists, also from foreign countries, need to register in order to lobby for Slovenian officials. We have none of, for example, lobbyists registering, foreign lobbyists registering in Slovenia. And this is in a time where the privatization phase is going on. And foreign companies are buying Slovenian companies. And we can see that there are a couple of lobbying contacts reported from, for example, representatives of these companies which want to buy and meet with decision makers. But it's just around 10, 20. You can see how big is the loophole. Also, we can see, for example, that how the lobbying is taking place. Basically, the foreign companies hire Slovenian law firms in order to conduct lobbying, and the lawyers are explicitly stipulating that they don't fall under the lobbying regulation, which is, of course, is not applicable and it's not true. And it's against the law when it comes to real lobbying and representing of another third party. So in regards to how this can be compiled, definitely not indirectly, but definitely it could be potentially a good source of information between the supervisory body in European level and the national levels. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And David, let me hear from you from the UK perspective.
Well, in the UK, we've just had the introduction of a lobbying register, a mandatory lobbying register for the first time, which went live in the last month. And you'll be pleased to know that it lists all of the people who are lobbying the UK government and all their clients. So there are 11 firms on there and 23 clients, because that's all the lobbying that happens in the UK, right? Of course, the lobbying register is, to use a technical term, rubbish. and only includes, according to the lobbyists, 1% of the people who are lobbying and who they are lobbying. And that's because it only includes the lobbying consultancies with multi-clients, and it only includes them if they have, in the last 3 months, met with either a minister or the most senior rank of civil servant. That's the only thing you have to report. So if you meet with junior civil servants, if you come from a company, if you come from a law firm, you don't have to register. So there'll probably 1%, if we're lucky, of lobbying meetings, and that's just the meetings, not the minutes and the correspondence, etc., of lobbying meetings will be registered. The lobbyists don't have to declare how much money they're spending, what issues they're lobbying on. They only have to declare the clients they've represented in that last 3 months in relation to the meetings they may or may not have had with ministers or senior civil servants. So this is a lobbying register which is a joke, which will never amount to anything in terms of transparency, which is much worse than the voluntary systems which we had before. And so the question is, what will happen to the register? It was brought in by the Conservative government in coalition with the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems were the ones who pushed it onto the agenda, and who are reaping the benefits of that in the coming elections by being almost entirely wiped out at the elections in a couple of weeks' time. We will see no progress on lobbying transparency in the UK if the Conservatives get back into Downing Street. If the Labour Party gets in, it's conceivable that we might see some minor progress. The only possibility for some more significant progress, it seems to me, is if there is a huge transformation of the voting patterns in Scotland, which appears to be on the cards according to the opinion polls. It looks as if of the 59 seats in Scotland, that between 46 and 56 will be held by the SNP after the election, which is a huge transformation. If that's the case, the SNP is the only larger party, with the exception of the Greens, who have put on record in their manifesto just issued 2 days ago that they will take a strong approach to regulating lobbyists, and that's a key indication. If the SNP get a big vote, they are committed to an anti-austerity politics of a sort of social democratic type, and they will take forward, probably more significantly than Labour, an approach to lobbying transparency which might take us forward at the UK level. But there's another thing to say, which is that at the Scottish level, there was a private member's bill brought forward in the last session of the Scottish Parliament, which is running until May next year, which then led to an investigation of the Standards Committee of the Parliament. A bill was then put forward and was taken over by the Scottish Government, and the Scottish Government is now committed to legislate by May 2016 on a mandatory register for lobbyists in Scotland, which will include clients and will include, according to the committee which decided this, will include the topics of lobbying, which is a significant step forward at the UK level. It will not include, it looks like, we don't know yet, it's not been written, but they didn't recommend that money would be put on the table as part of the Disclosure Act.
Okay, well, we are running very, very near the end. In fact, we've run over, and we still have to hear from Olivier and Sylvie. So I will take the one question from the gentleman there, keep it extremely brief, and then we will have closing remarks.
My name is Sven Giegold. I'm rapporteur in the Constitutional Affairs Committee on an initiative report for transparency, accountability and integrity of European institutions. And I first wanted to invite the participants to approach me with your suggestions, taking a broad view on the topic. And I think that in the debate we had today, we should enlarge the debate a bit more from transparency towards transparency as a means in order to re-establish political equality, because that is really what we lost. You can buy political influence with money, and transparency is basically a means in order to uncover that, but we need more means in order to restore political equality in a democratic process. And on the subject here on the panel, I think the big problem with the mandatory register is, if there will not be a legislative proposal, we will not have a means in order to challenge the practices on the Council level, because an interinstitutional agreement, I think, will be very weak concerning the Council. So what struck me a bit is, and I would like to hear the views of the participants, whether we could be clearer if we want, for pragmatic reasons, not to denounce the efforts with the interinstitutional agreement, whether we should ask for a clear split, so to say there are certain things you can do with the interinstitutional agreement and we should support that to be fast, but there are other things which also include obligations on the member states and their lobbying here, and for that and also for the sanctioning part, we need a fully fledged legislative approach. And that is, I think, would be a clearer demand than so far, basically asking the Commission to follow two paths in parallel on the same subject, which I think would be a difficult sell here in the Brussels community. So, I would like to know from you what you would like to see in such a Commission proposal, also outreaching towards the activities of the Council.
Okay, well, Inge, I'll let you deal with that in your closing remarks now. So.
I've turned it off. No, I believe this is a very interesting line of thinking that would certainly need to be explored. I will certainly pass on the message to the delegations, because indeed what has been discussed, and I will reiterate it, that the lobbying register is a very interesting animal, but we don't know where it lives and what it eats, if I can put it this way. We need to find a way how to live with it and how to treat it. And what would be very helpful indeed, and as we said, that it's the synergy between the Brussels work and the capital work, because the member states are the only ones who have, if I may say, who are sit on two chairs. Since the Commission and the European Parliament, they sit only on one chair. They are being the true and only Brussels-based institutions. Member states are not. Member states come to Brussels to perform their national functions to a large extent. If we can find that synergy, and I would not put it as a conflict or an excluding point, but if we could find a way to establish a synergy between what happens at the national level and what happens in Brussels, that would certainly help us to find the answer and to find a way.
Okay, thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for this panel. Now, Olivier and Sylvie, you've got some closing remarks. Do it from there. Do it from your seat.
Okay, just very briefly, I think this debate has shown that there will be a need for strong public pressure in the coming year to convince both the EU institutions to finally go for a mandatory register of high quality, that we will get full lobby transparency. Transparency on lobbying in Brussels, but also that progress on the national level registers is absolutely crucial. And with this debate today, we're also launching a new campaign by the Alter EU Coalition. You can see the logo up here and the slogan that is very clear. And we will be working in the coming year and longer with citizens groups from many EU countries, many of which are in the room today, to promote progress both on the EU level and on the national level, and we're hoping there will be strong synergies and there will be stronger momentum on both levels from these campaigns. The groups that are in the room and that are not yet involved, you are warmly invited to join this campaign. I have here a civil society sign-on statement that's addressed at the Commission that you might consider signing as a first step in getting involved. So you can come to me afterwards to get a copy or contact the Alter EU Secretariat.
Thank you very much, and thank you for organising the event. But we wouldn't, of course, be here in the Parliament building without our hosting MEP. So I will leave the final comments to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm delighted that we could meet here this morning. This showed that we could quietly and less quietly debate about a certain of issues. And if we look at the different proposals made this morning, I would like to say that we should focus on the common interests. First, transparency. This is a requirement, an emergency for our citizens, and transparency, but I'll come back to that later, should not lead to general suspicion. Interests as well for lobbies. They need to change their practices. They're under the scrutiny of NGOs, institutions, citizens, and their behavior will have an impact on the way they are seen. And then finally, all the NGOs working at all this. I would like to thank them for being here today. This would also be a way to find a solution to their claims and demands. To conclude, I would say that there will still be some gray areas in the future in the way topics are tackled, but we should move forward to avoid any damage to the transparency process. To do so, we need the necessary tools. And one final word from another perspective. It's not about tools, not about interests, but I'd like to say that we all have an interest in changing mindsets. And I said this when Frans Timmermans was here earlier on. We need to shift those mindsets in order to become the example. Second point, elected representatives' responsibility and accountability. Transparency should not be paired with suspicions. I'm insisting on this, all the more given the political climate in this House. And third point, let's not forget about the meaning of what we do and who we do it for. We are not doing this for ourselves. We also do it because citizens want it, and also because rules, papers, priorities have to be useful for our citizens. I don't know who used the expression bursting the Brussels bubbles. We need to get out of that Brussels bubble and make sure that our work is useful for our citizens, for the people we represent. Thank you very much for participating.
The conversation will obviously continue beyond today and beyond this room. If you do want to follow it online on Twitter, you can use the hashtag #LobbyTransparency and get involved. It's very democratic, Twitter. It's short, but it's democratic. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here.